Welcome to History with Herodotus, where the tapestry of time is woven with the threads of human experience. Today, we embark on a journey through one of the most pivotal and complex periods in human history, the Crusades. This epic tale of faith, conquest, and cultural collision will transport us to the medieval world, where the echoes of ancient civilizations still lingered and the whispers of a new era were beginning to stir. In the late 11th century, the Byzantine Empire, once the bastion of Christian orthodoxy, found itself beset on all sides by the rising tide of Islam. The Seljuk Turks, a nomadic people from the steppes of Central Asia, had begun to make incursions into Anatolia, threatening the very foundations of the Eastern Roman Empire. The Byzantine Emperor, Alexios I Komnenos, aware of the gravity of the situation, sent out a call for help to his counterparts in Western Europe, hoping to stem the tide of Turkish advances. Meanwhile, in the West, the Catholic Church was undergoing a period of significant transformation. The reforms of Pope Gregory VII had created a sense of renewed purpose and vigor within the clergy, and the idea of a unified Christendom began to take hold. The notion of a holy war, where Christian knights would take up arms to defend their faith and reclaim the sacred sites of Jerusalem, was starting to gain traction. This concept, rooted in the teachings of the Church Fathers and the examples of the Old Testament, would eventually coalesce into the crusading ideal. One of the key figures who would play a significant role in shaping this ideal was Peter the Hermit, a charismatic preacher from Amiens. Peter, driven by a deep sense of piety and a conviction that the end times were near, began to travel throughout Europe, calling upon the faithful to take up the cross and march towards Jerusalem. His message resonated with many, particularly among the nobility and the knightly class, who saw in the crusade an opportunity for adventure, glory, and spiritual redemption. It was here that Pope Urban II, a shrewd politician and a master orator, would deliver a sermon that would change the course of history. With his words, the die was cast, and the First Crusade began to take shape. The Pope's call to arms, which emphasized the need to liberate the Holy Land from Muslim rule and to protect Christian pilgrims, struck a chord with the assembled crowd. The response was overwhelming, as nobles and commoners alike pledged themselves to the crusading cause. Among them were men like Bohemond of Taranto, a cunning and ambitious Norman leader, and Godfrey of Bouillon, a pious and courageous knight from Lorraine. These individuals, along with many others, would soon find themselves at the forefront of a movement that would shake the foundations of the medieval world. In the summer of 1096, a group of largely unorganized and undisciplined crusaders, led by the charismatic but volatile Peter the Hermit, set out from Cologne, Germany, bound for Jerusalem. This ragtag army, known as the People's Crusade, was marked by its zealotry and lack of military discipline, and it would ultimately meet with disaster in the autumn of 1096 when it was annihilated by the Seljuk Turks near the city of Sivastot in modern-day Turkey. Meanwhile, a more formal and organized crusader army, led by nobles such as Bohemond of Taranto, Godfrey of Bouillon, and Raymond of Toulouse, began to take shape in the spring of 1097. This army, which would come to be known as the Prince's Crusade, was characterized by its greater military discipline and cohesion, as well as its more measured approach to the challenges that lay ahead. After a long and arduous journey across Europe and Asia Minor, the Prince's Crusade arrived at the walls of Antioch in October 1097, where it would become embroiled in a grueling and protracted siege that would last for nearly 8 months. The siege of Antioch was marked by numerous challenges and setbacks, including the harsh winter weather, the scarcity of food and supplies, and the constant threat of Turkish counterattacks. Despite these obstacles, however, the Crusaders persevered, buoyed by their conviction that they were fighting a holy war and driven by their determination to reclaim the city for Christendom. On June 2, 1098, after months of siege, the Crusaders finally breached the walls of Antioch, pouring into the city and claiming it as their own. As one contemporary observer noted, the city was taken, and the Turks were either killed or put to flight, and the Franks, with their crosses and banners, occupied the city and gave thanks to God for the victory he had granted them. Over the next several months, the Crusaders would consolidate their hold on Antioch, establishing a Christian government in the city, and preparing for the next phase of their campaign. In January 1099, the Crusader army set out from Antioch, bound for Jerusalem, which they hoped to capture by the summer of that year. The journey was long and arduous, marked by numerous challenges and obstacles, including the scorching desert heat, the scarcity of food and water, and the constant threat of Muslim attacks. Despite these difficulties, however, the Crusaders pressed on, driven by their conviction that they were fighting a holy war and determined to reclaim the city of Jerusalem for Christendom. On July 15, 1099, after months of travel, the Crusader army finally arrived at the walls of Jerusalem, where it would become embroiled in a fierce and bloody siege. The siege was marked by numerous atrocities and excesses, including the massacre of Muslim and Jewish civilians, and the desecration of sacred sites such as the Temple Mount. On July 15, 1099, after a long and brutal struggle, the Crusaders finally breached the walls of Jerusalem, pouring into the city and claiming it as their own. As the Crusaders claimed Jerusalem as their own, they established a Christian kingdom, with Godfrey of Bouillon as its first ruler, taking the title of Defender of the Holy Sepulchre. The city was left devastated, its population decimated by the brutal siege and massacre that had preceded the Crusader victory. Over the next several decades, the Kingdom of Jerusalem would face numerous challenges, including conflicts with neighboring Muslim states and internal power struggles among its Christian rulers. One of the most significant later events in the history of the Crusades was the establishment of the military orders, such as the Templars and Hospitallers, which played a crucial role in defending the Christian kingdoms and pilgrimage routes. These orders would become powerful and influential institutions, with their own armies, finances, and territories, and would shape the course of medieval history. The Crusades would continue for nearly 2 centuries, with various expeditions and campaigns launched to defend or expand Christian territory in the Holy Land. The Third Crusade, led by King Richard the Lionheart of England, would be one of the most notable, marked by its failed attempt to retake Jerusalem from the Muslim forces of Saladin. As the historian Stephen Runciman noted, the Crusades were a great and tragic failure, a failure not only of arms but of spirit, as they ultimately failed to achieve their goal of permanent Christian control over the Holy Land. Despite their military failures, the Crusades would have a lasting impact on Western society, shaping art, literature, and culture for centuries to come. The epic poems of the troubadours, the illuminated manuscripts of medieval monasteries, and the grand Gothic cathedrals of Europe all bear witness to the enduring legacy of the Crusades. Today, the Crusades are remembered as a complex and multifaceted phenomenon marked by both heroic idealism and brutal violence. As the historian Thomas Asbridge has observed, the Crusades were a product of their time, driven by a potent mix of religious fervor, political ambition, and economic interest. The legacy of the Crusades can be seen in the modern-day conflicts between Islam and the West, as well as in the ongoing struggles for power and identity in the Middle East. The Crusades may have concluded centuries ago, but their impact on Western society, culture, and politics remains profound. As we seek to understand the complexities of our modern world, it is essential that we remember the lessons of the past and recognize the enduring influence of this pivotal moment in human history. That's all for today's History with Herodotus. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and until next time, remember that to understand the present, we must first understand the past.